So for those of you who are thinking, oh God, he's gone full woo-woo on this conversation, the point is it's about building a really, really strong foundation. And that foundation requires a lot of self-care, self-work in the standpoint of understanding what I really care about, but doing it with some grace, as we say nowadays. Because if that foundation isn't poured properly, well, guess what's going to happen when you try to build a big house, a big, beautiful house on top of it? You're going to have some problems. And I think to what you were saying with your hill example, maybe a bit of the same sort of situation. I think the other thing that people should, I think, spend some time with is this notion of two ideas here. First off, we can retrain our brains. Neuroplasticity is entirely possible. It's there. It's not possible. It's what your brain does, I should say, rather. The other thing is nothing has to be this full scale, burn it all down to the ground.
Your business's success depends on relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Karl Ponto. Each week I bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week I'm excited to connect with Adrian Jones. Adrian is a two-time Widowmaker heart attack survivor, former financial services executive, and the founder of More, a career wellness company helping accomplished professionals move from numbed success to aligned reinvention. After 25 years in high-stakes finance, 2 near-death experiences forced AJ to rethink everything and rebuild a life aligned with purpose, clarity, and courage. Today, through his company, his upcoming book about authenticity, and his podcast, Code 3, Life Reinvented, AJ inspires others to trade burnout for belonging and success for significance, and to redefine what is possible before life forces them to. Congrats on your upcoming book, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Hey, Karl, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
So I think it's a perfect time to be talking about this with you because we're recording this early 2026, and oftentimes people are really evaluating what they want their year to be like and what they're happy or not happy with, setting resolutions, that sort of stuff. And there's a phenomenon where there's a lot of really successful people on paper leading very unfulfilled, unrewarding lives. And there's that lack of alignment, like we mentioned in your bio in the intro. So what do you see as the way for people who are in that sort of situation to find that alignment?
Yeah, I think ultimately it requires a couple of things. The first off is radical honesty with yourself. And this is something I talk a lot about and I firmly believe in, is that you've got to talk to yourself truthfully and work your way through the masks you might be wearing. Like, I wear a mask to go to work, which is really not showing who I really am inside. Or you have to also remove yourself from the expectations that are around you and have guided you or informed your decisions in life. So that's part one, is radical honesty. And the second part is really identifying what are your non-negotiables in life? What are your core values that you hold dear and are immutable? I think we as professionals who are out there doing the thing, and we have busy lives, wherever you are in life and wherever you are on the trajectory of your career, you're busy. You are commuting, you are going to work and showing up and executing. If you are married and have a family, you come home, you are a husband or wife, a spouse, a partner, you are a parent, potentially. You are other roles in your life, a son, a daughter, a brother, a sister, and so forth. So there's a lot pulling on us. And I think we tend to drift away from those non-negotiable, immutable values and core system structures that we need in our life. But to get to them, you've got to go back to that number one point. You've got to lock into being really, really honest with yourself. And it's not easy to do.
Yeah, I think it's not a wake up one day as a different person, but it's a slow erosion of the sense of self and values. And I think it also, it's that people don't really aren't in the habit of checking in with themselves or having even someone to help them be more accountable for themselves. I know I've read a number of places that the easiest person to deceive is ourselves. We can make excuses to ourselves all the time about things that we know are in our best interest, but we just don't feel like doing it at one time or another.
Of course.
And that compounds and builds habits and leads to a lot of issues. So what's the way for people to kind of figure out or realize they've been eroding that sense of value with them or what they value, and how to rebuild that landscape?
Yeah, I think, it's a really good question. I'm glad you asked it, because the way I say it is, and you said it, I think you articulated a really fundamental situation in our culture, in our workforce, is with all the things going on in our lives and all the pressures that are out there and the expectations, we tend to move away from ourselves. And there is this slow erosion, as you alluded to, in terms of our connection with ourselves. And ultimately, what I'm trying to do is to help people get more out of life. And that's why my business is called More. And a big chunk of that process is to have people come back to themselves, and rediscover who they are and what really lights them up. And so, I think I come back to, for those people who are out there running around and like, wow, I just, I might look successful on the outside on paper, but behind that, I don't know, I'm burning out, I'm fried. Well, what's probably really happening is you're misaligned. You're doing things that don't line up with your true self. And so when I talk about alignment, I'm talking about, I call this my 3 A's, my triple A's. It's when your authenticity, your actions, and your ambitions are in concert, not conflict. And so going even further with that, for people who are like, oh, what do I do here? I think you have to go through this process of radical honesty. Are my actions lined up with my core ambitions? And are my core ambitions, we have to have a real conversation with ourselves, are they really mine, or are they those of other forces, other influences, other expectations? So I push people and really recommend that people come back to what truly is central to them. Because once you identify, okay, this is my authentic truth, this is what I care about. It doesn't matter what anybody else. It'd be nice if other people cared about what I cared about, especially if they're loved ones in my lives. But if I want to go do X, Y, and Z in my life, well, go do it. And why aren't you doing it? Well, it doesn't pay enough. Well, it's risky to change careers. Well, to your point, we don't do the things that we like to do or we should do to take care of ourselves. I mean, I am so guilty of this. I need to floss my teeth more often, right? I absolutely hate going to the dentist for a variety of reasons. And one of the first ones is, and this is crazy because you think by now I'd have this figured out, but I still struggle with it. You go to the dentist, and the question I hate the most is, well, how often are you flossing? It's like, oh God, do I have to be honest? Sometimes. And it's like, God, come on, get over it. This is like a 1-minute thing to do once or twice a day, right? And yet I struggle with it. Why? And I think we all have that. It shows up in our lives in different ways. So if you want to come back to yourself and really focus in on what makes me truly happy, what brings me abundant joy, those are important questions to ask. And you should be asking them, because at the end of the day, and by the way, in your intro, and thank you for that nice intro, I am a 2-time Widowmaker survivor. Yes, I've touched death's door twice. So I'm all about, if you're not doing something that lights you up, why not? You've got one trip around this track called life, and it might end. We might come to our finish line at any moment. Maybe it's next in the next 5 minutes, maybe the next 5 years, the next 50 years, whatever it is. If you're not doing something that really brings you joy and fills up your cup, it's time to have an honest assessment about where you are. Because that erosion, the more you keep doing what you're doing that isn't in line with who you are, you experience this erosion inside. That misalignment starts building up. It starts to be identified as burnout or other sorts of symptoms. When you get that, your actions in tune with what you really care about and who you really are, you have an opportunity to hit more of a flow state, an aligned state. And I think that's where, with more, what we're trying to deliver through our platform, which maybe we'll get to later in this conversation. But ultimately, I've rambled on this answer, but I wanted to give it as good a cut as I could.
I think it's important because it's something that a lot of people feel, a lot of people experience this burnout, and there's this, I think, a lack of understanding about where it comes from. They think, oh, I'm just working too hard. Or like there's kind of the surface level understanding of kind of what they're feeling, but they mistake the symptoms for the cause, or they don't really understand what the underlying problems are that lead to the symptoms they're feeling. And so if they're just treating the symptoms and not treating the underlying problem, it doesn't really go away. And so I think it's important for people to understand that there's a lot of like the need to find that alignment and understand more about what is going on in their brain and what the choices they made over the course of their life that have led to this misalignment, what those really are. And it requires much more of a mindset shift and building a bunch of new habits to be to stay mindful and be able to connect more with oneself on a deeper level and then on a much more emotional level to kind of understand what your body's telling you, what your brain's telling you. Then I think most people haven't worked those muscles much, if at all. And so there's a lot of like having someone to coach you or to at least explain what's going on a psychological level, so people can get those reps in to build the skills to realign themselves so that the decisions they make on a daily basis, the habits they build, are ones that are going to invigorate them and not erode them going forward. Because even if you don't fix those underlying problems, you're still always going to have that erosion. It's not going to change the problems. Even it's like planting new grass on a hillside that's getting eroded away by the ocean. It might look fine for a while, but if you're losing the soil beneath it because of underground erosion, then it's still going to collapse eventually. So you got to figure out what's going on beneath the surface.
Yeah, that is exactly right. And I think some people, myself included, several years ago, might think, gosh, I don't know, it just seems so daunting to really take this time out and have a 360 self-assessment about where I am and what's working and what isn't. The couple things that come to mind about that is first of all, give yourself a lot of self-compassion. And it's one of the 6 pillars of the MORE methodology is around making sure you understand and take care of yourself. You have to, I often use the house metaphor in talking about this. So for those of you who are thinking, oh God, he's gone full woo-woo on this conversation. The point is, it's about building a really, really strong foundation. And that foundation requires a lot of self-care, self-work in the standpoint of understanding what I really care about, but doing it with some grace, as we say nowadays. Because if that foundation isn't poured properly, well, guess what's going to happen when you try to build a big house, a big, beautiful house on top of it? You're going to have some problems. And I think to what you were saying with your hill example, maybe a bit of the same sort of situation. I think the other thing that people should I think spend some time with is this notion of two ideas here. First off, we can retrain our brains. Neuroplasticity is entirely possible. It's there. It's not possible. It's what your brain does, I should say, rather. The other thing is nothing has to be this full scale, burn it all down to the ground, radical reinvention, whatever you want to say. No, it does not have to be that way, and certainly not something that I espouse. But you can take baby steps, because guess what? Action creates clarity. So even if you're not sure which way you want to go, the status quo, your listener's status quo is actually status no. Okay, well then let's start breaking it down. So we talked about getting in tune with your core immutable values. Then it's like, okay, well, I don't know where to go with things. Well, what I suggest is start with something really, really simple. It's called the I want exercise. This is really, really basic, but it can provide some clarity. So the I want exercise is, here's the guidelines. Go someplace quiet where you can have some space to think. You put your phone down so you're not interrupted by texts or anything like that. Maybe leave it behind wherever you go, and get your mind in a space where it's calm. Do some deep breathing. And then with your piece of paper and a pen or a writing instrument, write down, I want ... And underneath that, answer the question, what do you want? With no caveats, no, well, if I don't have the money to do that, or I don't have the experience to do that. Don't worry about those limiting beliefs. Just write down what you want. I want to be a podcast host. I want to be a 10th grade math teacher. I want to start a donut store, whatever it is. Whatever. It could be anything. I don't want to work anymore. I don't want to work this crappy job anymore. Whatever. Write down that list and just see what happens. See what bubbles up. Can you categorize as a lump some of these together? Do you see a bit of a theme or a pattern? Once you establish that, again, we haven't put any restrictions in place. This is free thinking, no bad ideas. And then once you start seeing a trend or something that really pops up that excites you, you're like, whoa, I didn't expect to see this. Well, then why don't you take some baby steps towards it, right? Whatever that is, whether that's a little research, watching some YouTube videos on that given topic. They're, in our world and as podcasters, there's podcasts that probably cover what you're interested in. Reach out to someone in your network who does what you do, or closely approximates doing what you're interested in doing. Have an informational conversation. Little things like that can provide clarity as the more you move forward through those baby steps, whether maybe it's one baby step this week. Don't take on too much, because you don't want to take on something that you can't continue to do moving forward, right? And I encourage little baby steps. And so anyways, that's how I see these things, and maybe ways to address them.
Yeah, I really like that advice of taking baby steps, because I guess we're recording this early January. One of the reasons why so many resolutions fail is because people are trying to make too big of a change at once. And it's when our brains are presented with big changes, it sees it as a threat, and it equates that to death, and it comes up with all these excuses and reasons why you shouldn't make this big change. And if you're not aware of that's what your brain is doing, then it's easy to listen to it and make up excuses and not keep up with what you resolved to do for the year. But if you break these big goals into tiny little steps and just focus on making one or two of those at a time, that slow progress builds new habits, and it doesn't trigger the fear response that our brain has compared to the big change. And you'll find over time that you're like the neuroplasticity, you're building new neural pathways, you're building new habits, and you're transitioning from where you are now to where you want to be in a way that is going to stick, because you're changing things in a way that your brain is comfortable doing it. And so it's that sort of exercise, I think, is brilliant because it helps give people that first baby step, but also just starts to help them build the habit of pausing and listening to themselves and thinking about what they really want. And so often people make choices in their life or in their careers and whatnot based on what other people have told them or what they other outside influence, and it's not really what they want or who they are. And so just building that habit of, okay, I'm going to take an hour and just go somewhere quiet, turn off the phone, leave it in the car or whatever, and just listen to myself and ask and evaluate what I really want in life is a huge first step. Well, it's a small first step towards huge transformation that actually sticks, is a better way of putting it.
Yeah. And I think the other really important thing, and you mentioned something that I got excited about, is yes, I totally agree on the small steps, and let's not scare ourselves. I'm going to lose 50 pounds in January. Whatever, like might be a little much. I don't know. But maybe it's something a little more manageable. But I think the other thing that's really important is if you go through this process, the other thing that's key is to redefine what authentic success means to you, right? Because we might be doing things because we thought we should, right? The old should word, right? We've been should on, and it's time to fix it. And like, let's redefine what success is. When I started my professional career in financial services, I don't know, I just thought I could make some really good money. And the further I went within that industry and in my career, it was about getting promoted and getting to the next promotion and having a bigger mandate or remit in what I was doing. Certainly the earnings was really important to me. The cash and prizes that went along with the comp plan, et cetera, et cetera. But when I put myself through all this several years ago, I also needed to move my goalposts for success because they were unfairly put out there by other people and societal expectations and the inputs that I had absorbed throughout the course of my life, that it needed to be, oh, you've got to be a top tier exec at a top tier financial services firm, whatever. And in actuality, like, that's not really what I want. Or maybe I did then 20 years ago, but now it's something totally different. So why am I holding myself accountable to those set of goalposts when they really need to be moved fairly so I can do something different and enjoy my life in a very, very different way? On a very personal level, to give you and your listeners an example, I'm a native Californian. I was born in a place called Marin County, just over the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco. I never in a bazillion years thought I would leave California. Like, I am a Californian to my core. My ancestors came over on a wagon train in the 1840s and so forth. Like, this is where I'm at. But when I started my company more and I left the world of financial services to do this, well, yeah, I went from earning this much money to no money. But I loved what I was doing and where I was headed so much. But for us to remain where we lived would require either my company going from zero to $1 bazillion, not quite, but you get my point. So I could support and live in the high cost of living area that it was, or we could move somewhere else, my wife and I, where we remove a lot of the financial pressures of living in California and do this and live our lives quite differently. And therefore, in a lower cost of living market, it would extend the runway for me to build what I fundamentally believe in and not have to worry about paying this California-sized mortgage and extraordinarily high property taxes and so on and so on. I never thought I'd ever leave California. And now I live in coastal North Carolina, and it's a very different environment here. Cost-wise, it's a slower pace of life, all the things. But for me, I had to change my definition of authentic success. It wasn't living in a fancy zip code in a fancy area in fancy Bay Area, but it was like, let's change things up so that I can do the things I want to do because I want to drive in this different direction. And it might require some lean earning years. And so we have to make the corresponding changes, but that will bring me greater fulfillment. It's more in line to my immutable core values. And life is so much better and I'm so much happier. So anyways, that was my personal example. Maybe that'll be a source of inspiration or spark inspiration for someone.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for connecting with me today, Adrian. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection podcast, please like, leave a review, and subscribe. If you want to connect with myself or Adrian, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.